Good morning, FCCT. How's it going today? Good. I'm glad everybody's survived the storms. You guys didn't get, wow, what's going on back there? Sounds like you're wrenching on a car or something. Today's going to be a day of difficulties, I see. So, we had a lot of storms. How many of you guys had some storms this week at your house? All right, lots of you. How many of you guys had any kind of damage or anything like that going on for you? All right, so, we largely got away without the damage. But as I was surveying the property and the building, the rain has caused a lot of growth, and weeds now are a daily challenge. Every day there's work to be done, and it made me think about our topic today, which is serving. Now, remember, in a sermon series, we're talking about how Adam and Eve, they ate of the apple because they wanted to be like God, and it was kind of a shortcut. It was an easy path. Really, what we're called to do as believers is we're called to be Christ-like. We're called to resemble God, and we're called to do that through a spiritual transformation in our lives, the Holy Spirit working in our lives. And throughout history, the church has seen the spiritual disciplines as a way not of transforming ourselves, but a way of cooperating with the Spirit's desire to transform us in our lives. And today we're going to talk about the spiritual discipline of service, and we're going to be in John chapter 13, verses 1 through 11. If you want to turn there, we'll be there in a minute. Something happened this last week. Kind of earlier, maybe it was late last week. Dates aren't my thing. But the thing that happened, I was largely unaware of until it had already happened, and that was that apparently the rapture was supposed to happen. How many of you guys were aware of that before it happened? Okay, a few of you were. The rapture was supposed to happen, and what's interesting about this is that I guess there's a guy named Joseph Malekala or something like that. I might be mispronouncing his name. I don't know that I ever heard it pronounced in a way that seemed like it fit, but maybe that's me. But he had predicted that I think it was the 23rd and the 24th of September was the day that the rapture was going to happen. And what was interesting to me is that, with new technology, things have changed a lot. My dad was a pastor, and back in the day, we used to get things mailed to us that people would say, oh, the rapture is going to happen on this day, and all this kind of stuff. But now, you can actually live stream that, and so that's what apparently they did, was there was a live stream going on, about 12 hours of it, and apparently they were trying to get it on camera or something. I'm not really sure. But what was interesting to me was just kind of the whole notion of kind of live streaming your last moments or hours on earth. And I found that kind of interesting because, we all kind of have our own TV studios now, right? And we carry them around in our pockets, which is kind of a crazy thing. This isn't just a computer, it's a TV studio that allows you to broadcast all over the world. And it was interesting to me to think about that people would want to spend what they thought were their last hours on earth live streaming. It was strange to me. Thinking back to when my dad was a pastor and we used to get these notes in the mail, it would be a strange thing for us to think about kind of having your last moments on earth be spent in front of a camera. You would think to yourself, well, I want my last moments to be spent with my family or my loved ones or not an audience. But that's kind of where we're at now as a culture, isn't it? That the idea is that kind of go big or go home. That if you're going to do something that you kind of, if it's not big enough, if it's not bold enough, if it's not watched by enough people, if it doesn't have a big enough impact, then what's the use of doing it? And that seems to be that kind of the culture that we are in right now. And what's interesting is that I don't know that the Bible always reflects that. And what we see here in our text today is certainly something that should cause us to kind of ponder that idea just a little bit. John chapter 13, we're going to start in verse 1. Now remember that when we get to the 13th chapter of John, we're getting in the end. right? Because John is not a very long book. So we're here and we're at the Feast of the Passover. This is the end of the line for Jesus. This is the Passover. He's going to be arrested soon. He's going to be crucified soon. We're down to the last of Jesus' life. And you think to yourself, well, if Jesus is going to be at the very end of his life, how is he going to spend that? And you want to contrast that maybe to how, is he going to live stream it? Well, obviously, he didn't have a phone. But it's really interesting the way he chose to do this. You would think that maybe, he would spend the very end of his life just in front of thousands and thousands of people, because Jesus is a person who could draw a big crowd. And yet that's not what he's doing here. In John chapter 13, verse 1, it says, "Now, before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end." And I love that phrase there. He loved them to the end. You see, the interesting thing is that Jesus had these followers that were very close to him, his 12 disciples, and there were different kind of concentric circles around Jesus. There were the crowds that were kind of coming and going in and out of his life and were there sometimes, but often were not. And then there was a group of people that were much smaller, but that were more consistent in his life. But the ones who were really around him all the time were the 12 disciples. And it says, to the very end, he loved them. Verse 2 says, during supper, when the devil had already put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from supper. He laid aside his outer garments, and taking a towel, tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter and said to them, "Lord, do you wash my feet?" Jesus answered him, what I am doing, you do not understand now, but afterward you will understand. Peter said to him, "You shall never wash my feet." And Jesus answered, "If I do not wash you, you have no share with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head." And Jesus said to him, "The one who has bathed does not need to wash except for his feet, but he is completely clean. And you are clean, but not every one of you." For he knew who was to betray him. That was why he said, "Not all of you are clean." Now we have this interesting anecdote that Jesus is spending his last time as a free person before he will be arrested, go into his trials, and ultimately be crucified. He's spending it with these people that were close to him. And not only is he spending it with people who are close to them, but he's doing a very small thing in their presence. And it struck me how interesting of a contrast this was to what I saw with the people who were trying to live stream their last moments on earth. And I want to take what the Bible says here and maybe drill down into it and find some lessons that we might be able to learn. I think we need to talk about, first of all, the humility of service. Because it's really important to understand that her service, if it's to be done rightly, has to be done out of humility. Secondly, we're going to talk about the fruit of service, and then finally, we're going to talk about the joy of service. So let's talk about the humility of service. One of the things that's fascinating about this story is that it says that Jesus rose from the table. Now, this is fascinating because back in this day and age, in the culture that Jesus lived in, sandals were the footwear. You didn't have to ask yourself, well, what's going to be in this season? The answer is always sandals. Right? There's no new styles. It's sandals. It's sandals for fall. It's sandals for spring. It's sandals for winter. It doesn't matter if you're in autumn. You're going to wear sandals, right? So sandals are always the answer in this day and age in Jesus' time. And the problem is that also paved roads aren't a thing really yet. And so the problem is that your feet get very dirty. And what happens is that when you get invited over to somebody's house, you don't want to be looking, rough. And so when you would go to somebody's house, the lowest servant in that house would have the job of washing feet because it's not the most pleasant of jobs. And what we have here is that Jesus is getting together. It's a small, intimate celebration of the Passover, and there is no lowest servant there. And so the thing that happens is that normally you would have your feet washed as you entered into the house. They're already at the table, and the feet have not been washed yet. And the reason for that is because nobody wants to do it. Right? I mean, imagine being invited to somebody's house for dinner, and they're like, so, are you going to be doing the foot washing tonight? Right? You're kind of going to pass on that. And so everybody has passed on that. Now remember that you're talking about the disciples here who have these strange moments of kind of really getting it and cluing into what Jesus is doing, but largely missed the point on a regular basis. They've argued about which one of them is the greatest on more than one occasion. And here what you see happening is that they have this opportunity. Somebody could say, I am going to do this and wash everybody's feet, but nobody has done that. They're at the table, and Jesus gets up from the table, and he's the one who washes their feet. And here's the thing. This is, by any measure, a small thing. You see, the thing that we have to understand, first of all, about service is that it comes out of humility. It doesn't come out of a sense of grandiosity. The wrong attitude toward service is to say, well, how can I change the world? How can I make a big impact? How can I do something that nobody else has done? How can I do something that will get me noticed, or that everybody will remember, or that when people are sitting there at my funeral will talk about, how can I do something like that in this moment? That is the wrong motivation, the wrong attitude toward service. That is not how you serve. You do what Jesus is doing here, which is you see some small thing that has gone unnoticed, and you decide that you're the person to do something about it. The question is, what is the purpose of our service? Why do we serve? What are we trying to accomplish? What do we hope to gain? And the problem with starting off our service in a grandiose way is that it has the wrong objective. Our service, if it's to be used by the kingdom, has to be oriented toward the kingdom. It has to be in line with the values of the kingdom. It has to fit into the ethos of the kingdom. And the issue is here, are you trying to store up for yourselves treasures on earth? Are you trying to be seen by men? Are you trying to be appreciated by people? Are you trying to make an impact? Are you trying to have an influence? Are you trying to get clout? Or are you building up for yourself a treasure in heaven? True service comes from humility. And the reason for that is because the opportunities for true service are only seen by people who are humble. You know, the interesting thing is that all the disciples could have seen that their feet were dirty. All of the disciples knew that their feet were dirty. They could all see that part of the equation. Right? All of the disciples knew that nobody had washed their feet. All of the disciples understood that, the way that you sit at the table in the time and place that we're talking about is the table was very low, and so you reclined at table, and so your feet kind of jutted out, and your feet were next to other people. They all were aware of the problem. You see, it doesn't take a lot of vision to see the problem. What it takes is true humility to see that the solution to the problem is you. You see, this is the reality of the situation, is that most of the time, we all see the problem, but the humble person sees themselves as the solution to the problem. You see, they're not looking at changing the world. They're just looking at, there's a problem right in front of me, and I could take care of that. Whereas everybody else is too worried about being grandiose. You see, it's interesting to me that the disciples on multiple occasions argued about who was the greatest. They argued about who would sit at Jesus' right hand or his left hand. They wanted those positions of great authority, of great power, of great influence. They wanted to do great things. And Jesus here is not doing a great thing. He's washing the feet of 12 people. He's washing 24 dirty feet. That's all he's doing. We might want to say that it is something great, it's something grandiose, but it's actually something very small and very simple. But it shows something very important, which is that the humble person sees what they see because they have a different motivation. You see, the problems may be out there. People may be aware of them. But the idea of meeting them isn't. You know, do you remember the story that there's a situation where there's a great crowd of people and they don't have anything to eat? And the interesting thing is Jesus basically says, you feed them. And the issue, well, we don't have any food to feed them with. Right? How are we going to do that? And the interesting thing is that the answer is not raiding the Costco warehouse. Right? Jesus is like, hey, throw on some masks, go rob the Costco warehouse, bring it back. No, it's not like, hey, start a revolution. And, no, it's not any of those things. It's very small. The interesting thing is that the answer is very, very small. This kid's got a lunch. That's the answer. We have 5,000 people that need to be fed. This kid's got a lunch. Here's the interesting thing. What would happen if everybody shared their lunch? I was thinking about this idea that what would happen if everybody shared their lunch? The thing that's interesting about this is that it kind of came to mind with this idea of how much food actually goes to waste, right? How many of you guys are familiar with Roy's Food Repair? Anyone? Roy's Food Repair? One person. So there's a skit. I think was it SNL? There was an SNL skit, John Candy, and he has a business. He's an entrepreneur, I guess. He has his business. It's Roy's Food Repair. And the joke is that you can bring your food to him that's broken or whatever, and he'll fix it. And one lady's like, I was bringing this cake to this get-together, and one of my kids grabbed some frosting. He's like, oh, yeah. Well, I got that color in the back. I'll fix it up for you. And then, somebody has like some pretzels, and the salt has fallen off of them because the bag got shaken too much. And, it's just this funny. The point of it is that we don't do that, right? Why? Because food is too cheap to repair. And the interesting thing is that we live in a society where we're always talking about the poor and the needs of the poor. And we do that in a society where food is so cheap that we don't fix it, we throw it away. Why do we not see that so often these really, really large problems have very, very small solutions? And I think that a lot in life is like that. You can talk about the homelessness problem. You can talk about the loneliness problem. You can talk about all kinds of problems. And the issue is that when you look at it as a problem, it's a really big thing. But oftentimes, the only viable solution to that is a lot of people doing very small things. But that kind of answer often goes ignored. I was thinking about this, and I thought about this idea of like, what if everybody was just doing what they could do? And it's kind of hard to figure out, like in the world, like how would the world change if that was the case? But I did find an interesting statistic as I was searching through this idea that how much money is wasted in companies by employees being under-engaged. Under-engaged, right? So that just means that you're not working real hard. How much money is wasted? And the studies that they've done, they've actually done studies on this, is that if you take everybody across the nation, you average it out, that 34% of everyone's salary is wasted from under-engagement. 34%. That means that we could have an economy that's a full third grader if we were all just engaged. And what would that engagement look like? Some great plan, some great program? Or would it look like everybody just going looking around and saying, hey, what could I do to make our company better? What can I do to further the company's goals and objectives? What could I do to make us more efficient? What could I do to make us better in the marketplace? What could I do to serve our customers in a greater way? There's a humility to vision that has to be there in order for us to be of any use in God's kingdom whatsoever. And there's a great story that hinges upon this principle in Daniel chapter 4. And it starts off in verse 29 and 30. Now, Nebuchadnezzar is the king, and he's this king of this nation, this empire called Babylon, and he's a pretty big deal. And if you remember Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, they're all they're all in his kingdom because that's what they got hauled off to, that kingdom. And what happens is that this guy Nebuchadnezzar is always having these dreams, he's having these visions. And he has one, he doesn't really understand it, and he goes to Daniel, and usually Daniel is able to tell him what this situation is, but he doesn't always necessarily change his behavior. And this is one of those times where he had this vision, and it was explained to him, and he didn't really change. It says he has this vision of basically a tree getting chopped down, and Daniel goes, "Oh, that's you." Basically, this is the way he deals with the warning. Verse 29 of chapter 4 of Daniel. It says, "At the end of 12 months, he was walking on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon, and the king answered and said, 'Is not this great Babylon, which I have built by my mighty power as a royal residence and for the glory of my majesty?'" Now here's the thing. Now, he's been warned that his head's getting a little too big. He's been warned in Daniel's dream that, you can go on for a long time, but sooner or later, God's going to cut you down, right? He's been warned. And what he's done with that warning is he's got up there and he's looked across his great empire, he's looked across his great country, and he said, "Is not this for the glory of my majesty? This thing, this city, all these people, this whole country exists for my glory." And it says he loses his mind and he goes off and he lives like an animal of the field. He basically goes nuts and he's eating the grass like a cow. God has a way of humbling us. Daniel chapter 4, if we go down to verse 34, it says, "At the end of days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes to heaven, and my reason returned to me, and I blessed the Most High and praised and honored him who lives forever." He lifts his eyes to heaven and his sanity is restored. Man, there's so much to be teaching out of this passage. "For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are accounted as nothing, and he does according to his will among the host of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth. And none can stay his hand or say to him, 'What have you done?' At the same time, my reason returned to me, and for the glory of my kingdom, my majesty and splendor returned to me. My counselors and my lords sought me, and I was established in my kingdom, and still more greatness was added to me. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol the King of heaven, for all his works are right, and his ways are just, and those who walk in pride he is able to humble." And all it takes being turned into a cow, and there you have it. But did you notice the big change? Did you notice the big change? First he said, "Is not this great Babylon, which I have built by my mighty power as a royal residence and for the glory of my majesty," he's saying this kingdom is for my glory. But notice something happens. He says in verse 36, "My majesty and splendor returned to me." Why? Look at the beginning. "At the same time, my reason returned to me, and for the glory of my kingdom, my majesty and splendor returned to me." You see the inversion here? At first, the kingdom was for his glory, and now his glory and majesty returned to him for the glory of his kingdom. You see, the difference is important for us to understand, and it's humility that got him to this place. It's all this kingdom is here to glorify me versus I am given glory for this kingdom. You see, it's a completely different mindset. And it's the only mindset out of which your service is going to be fruitful and it's going to count for anything. Because true service comes out of humble love. You see, this passage is so interesting in John chapter 13 because it says that Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hand, he had come from God, he rose from the supper, he laid aside his garments, taking a towel, he tied it around his waist, and then he washes their feet. Now, why does he do that? Because it says, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. He did this because he loved them. Jesus is not sitting there going, I'm going to make this great theological statement. Now, we're getting a great theological lesson out of it, but that's not what was going on. Jesus looked at the disciples, and he loved them, and he said, their feet are dirty, I'll wash them. It was as simple as that, but even though it looks so simple, it only comes out of a humble heart. Right? You can't, if you're full of pride, you're never going to do this. You're never going to see this. You're never going to put on that towel and take that low place and say, I can do something about this. It only comes out of a heart that's truly humble, that truly loves those around it and seeks to bless the people that are put in its place. True service comes from humble desires. He's not trying to make the most of himself. He's not trying to self-actualize. He's not trying to level up. He's not trying to do any of those things. He's just trying to bless someone else, seeing the low thing that is in your capacity to raise up, not the high thing that's outside of your capacity. Well, let's talk about the fruit of service, because it's really important to understand that when you have this idea of true service, when it comes from a truly humble place, then it bears fruit. So let's talk about the fruit of service. In John chapter 15, verse 1 through 6, it says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away, and every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. You see, do you get it? Do you get an idea of what God is after here? The branches that are not fruitful, he takes away. The branches that are fruitful, he leaves alone, right? No. The branches that are fruitful, what does he do? He prunes them so that they'll be more fruitful. Do you catch a glimpse of what's on the heart of God? That what is God after here? God is after making the world a fruitful and glorious place. Now, what's the purpose of fruit? You know, it's interesting to think about because we always talk about being fruitful, but what's the purpose of fruit? Why does it exist? You know, what's interesting is fruit is a very strange thing, right? Because we have seedless fruit now. You know what I'm talking about? Seedless grapes. I like them. I even understand that there's seedless watermelons. I guess they've been around for a long time. I don't really eat watermelon. But if I was going to, seedless seems to be the way to go for me. Right? Why deal with all those seeds? But here's the thing. That's not natural. Let's just get that out of the way. Even though I like seedless fruit, it's not natural. It's a strange thing. Now, because what's the deal with fruit? Here's the thing. Like if you go out into the desert, everything's got thorns on it, right? Everything's just like trying to kill you or make your life miserable. Right? Choyas. I don't know why they exist other than to make my life miserable. Right? But here's the thing. Fruit trees are different. Fruit trees come along and say, hey, I'm your buddy. I'm your friend. I got this nice apple. I got this nice pear. I got this nice apricot. It's right here. Why don't you eat it? It's really good. Right? And then you eat it, and then what's the deal? What is the deal that the fruit tree is making with you? What's that? That you're going to deposit the seed somewhere else, right? It's this great thing where both the things are pleased and glorified, right? Like you go up and you get a regular grape, not a seedless grape, not one of those abominations that I love so much. But here's the thing, you get a regular grape and you eat it, and then you could spit out the seed, but what are you doing, man? You're like Johnny Appleseed. Right? You're walking along, you're eating those grapes, and you're spitting those seeds out. Where are they going? Everywhere. The fruit tree's like, yes, this was the plan the whole time, right? That's what fruit is. Fruit is mutual glorification. It's mutual love. It's mutual service. It's a thing that is good for both of you. It's a thing that serves both of you. You see, why is God so concerned about us being fruitful? Because that's the picture of the world that God desires to create. He desires to create this world where you and I are constantly leveling each other up. Not ourselves, we're leveling each other up. What we're doing is we're praising each other, we're encouraging each other, we're challenging each other, we're helping each other to grow. We're constantly pushing for each other to have a better life. We're constantly loving each other. That's the world. That's the image of the world that God is trying to create. And that's why in all of these images, God uses these fruit trees and vines and things like that as ways to image what He's trying to help us to see, what He wants us to become. He is the true vine. Jesus is the true vine. And His Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, He takes away. And every branch that does bear fruit, He prunes that it may bear more fruit. Already you are clean because of the word that I have spoken to you. Abide in me and I in you, as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. For apart from me you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is thrown away like a branch and withers, and the branches are gathered, thrown into the fire and burnt. It's very clear here that what God is working at is a scenario, a situation where all of us become more fruitful. Now the question is that does our service fall into line with the purposes of God? Does our service do that? Is that what you're aiming for in your service? Because here's the problem. If you're not aiming for that in your service will ultimately be fruitless. And nothing will burn you out faster than fruitless service. You see, the thing that's important for us to understand is that eventually, if the thing that you're doing is not yielding results, you'll stop doing it. And the problem is that many times as we get older, we stop being engaged in service because we feel burned out, because we feel like we don't have anything to offer, because we feel like that our efforts are wasted, that people either don't appreciate them or they don't achieve what we want to. And a lot of the times, the reason is because we haven't aimed at being fruitful in our service. We've aimed at some of the things that we talked about in the last point. We've aimed at aggrandizing. We've aimed at being appreciated. We aimed at making something big instead of looking at something small that is within our power. True service bears fruit. And being served by God means that He will prune you so that you will bear fruit. And the question I have is, do you look at the fruit that you're producing? Are your acts of service producing fruit, and are you aware of that? You see, the thing that's important for us to understand is when you're a parent, your acts of service toward your children can make spoiled children or it can make productive adults, right? And what kind of parent doesn't look at what's being produced? You want to figure that out, right? Probably pre-graduation, right? You know, before your kids graduate, you probably want to go, hey, what's this producing right now? And if it's not producing what you want to change that. The same thing goes for every act of service that we engage in. The truth is that many people in their acts of service pour gasoline on a fire because what they're aimed at is not producing fruit. And you say, well, how do I know whether it's producing fruit or not? How do I know? How do I evaluate it? Well, the thing is that when you're a farmer, there's a couple of things that you do. You plant things, you water things. Obviously, you harvest after the fruit's there, but you plant things and you water things. And then what is being pointed out in this passage, you also prune things. And the question is does your service have all of these elements to it? Because here's what I've noticed is some people are good at planting, some people are good at watering, some people are good at pruning, but there aren't that many people that are good at all three. There aren't that many people who have a balance to the way that they serve. And what I've found is a lot of times if you don't include pruning in your service, you don't get very much fruit. It's interesting that this is the way that God explains it. He says He prunes you so that you'll be more fruitful. The question is that do you have that in your bag of tricks? Do you have that in your list of tools? Is pruning something that you engage in? The service of pruning can't be overlooked. In Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1, For verse 11, it says, "For the moment all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant, but later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it." Notice that there's fruit involved here. And again, it comes through pruning. How many of you guys enjoy the process of having parts of yourself, parts of your life pruned? Does anybody here enjoy it? It's usually painful. That's what it says. It comes through discipline. You know, the thing is that a lot of times what happens in our lives is that we go through difficulties and we say, God, this must not be what you want for me. And so we change and we do something else. And one of the things that I've discovered here later on in my life is that almost every good thing in my life, every true piece of value in my life, and I'm not talking about the treasures of this earth, I'm talking about the treasures of heaven. I'm talking about the character formation, the virtues of my life, and the things that I've been able to bring to other people. Almost everything that truly matters in my life has come at the cost of difficulty. The truth is, I was thinking about this the other day. I fail almost every time I try something. Almost every time. The number of times that I succeed right away is so minuscule that when it happens now, I just think, what happened? Something must be wrong. Is God turned against me? Like, how did this go so easy? I've been working on music in that room. We're going to have the tailgating over there. Couldn't think of the word. Tailgating over there. We're going to have some great food. We're going to have some great games over there. So please join us after church if you can. And I've been working on getting music over there. Every time I've worked on putting music over there, it's been a complete failure. It works during the week, and then during the weekend, it won't work for whatever reason. And I was just like, this is ridiculous. How can I fail so much at this? And then I put in something new, and it just worked. You might actually have music over there today. If you do, it's going to be a miracle. But it just worked. It just worked, and I thought to myself, is God against me now? Because it doesn't happen very often. Now, I don't say that to say that God is mean to us. It's just the opposite. God knows that what we need in our life is we need challenge. Because in order for us to grow, in order for us to experience the character that we need, in order for us to have every good and perfect gift, we have to endure discipline. We have to persevere. We have to face trials. We have to put everything in our minds and our hearts and our bodies into the project that God has for us. Everything has to be taken by God, and it has to be refined. And if you're holding a lot of stuff back, and that usually happens when we succeed right away, right? Then God is not working with a whole bunch of you, and He wants to work with all of you. Notice how Jesus disciplines Peter even in this moment. Peter goes off, and Jesus very gently says, no, Peter, that's not the way that this works. If you want to have a part of me, then you have to let me wash your feet. And then Peter goes the other way, as Peter often does. And Jesus says, no, Peter, come back. Come back. Let's stick to what's going on right now. All the time, Peter's getting rebuked. And Peter becomes this amazing guy by the time you read the rest of the New Testament. God prunes us. And so you have to be engaged in pruning in your service. Because ultimately, God will use the things to glorify you that Satan means to use to destroy you. And let's talk about finally the joy of service as we close. Jesus says here that he knows. He says that he knows that the hour had come, in verse 1, to depart out of this world to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. And it says that Jesus, in verse 3, knowing that the Father had given all these things into his hands and that he had come from God and was going back to God, that he engaged in this. And it's interesting that I think what we're being told there is that Jesus, he knows who he is. He knows who his Father is. He knows what his power is. He knows where glory is found. He knows all of those things because he knows his identity. You know, see, the reality is this, that service does not come just out of looking at somebody else's need, but it comes from your needs being met. And I think that's why Jesus says to Peter, unless I wash your feet and you don't have any part of me. I need to serve you before you can serve other people. You have to accept my service before you have anything to offer others. The reality is that until we accept God's grace and forgiveness of us, until we accept the identity of being His children that's offered only through the cross, can we have anything in our lives to give to other people? You see, true service, real service, comes out of joy. And that is something difficult, because most of the time when we serve, it's not from joy. We say, why in the world does this happen? Why do I have to deal with this thing again? Why do I have to take care of this problem? Why do I have to tell Peter again to not go crazy? Why do I have to do that one more time? Why can't Peter get it together? Why is the foot washing still an issue? Why haven't they gotten it and taken care of this? Does this ring any bells to anybody? Does anybody else serve like that? Does anybody else sometimes go, I am so frustrated with this. Why does God have me doing this? Does anybody else do that? I guess it's just me. So here's the thing. True service comes out of joy. It comes out of recognizing that God has done so much for you that no matter how much time you spend serving others, you will never, ever, ever catch up. He gave me food so I can share it with you. He gave me hope so I can share it with you. He gave me love so I can share it with you. He gave me life so I can share it with you. You see, the thing is that all these things that I can give, it's only because of the overflow of what God has given me. We talk about believing, belonging, becoming. We need to believe that we are the recipients of the greatest gift that can be given. We need to belong to Him by accepting that gift, and we need to become givers of gifts.
Thanks for joining our worship service today. Please follow us on our Facebook page, where you can let us know about any needs or prayer requests you may have and keep up with the latest church news and events. You can also check out all of our past lessons and other videos by visiting our YouTube channel. At First Christian Church, we strive to be the presence of Christ in the world by helping others to believe in God's love for them, to belong to His church, and to become like Christ in their lives. If you would like to support us in our ministry, you may do so by giving online through our website at www.fcct.org or by mailing checks to the church. Have a great week.